I was 12 years old the night the Iron Covenant found me, and I couldn't see their faces. But I heard them. All 163 of them. I've been blind since I was 4, a fever that burned too long and took the light with it when it went. My mother used to say God made me with better ears to make up for it, and I believed her, the way you believe your mother about everything when you are small and she is your whole world. What she never told me, not once in all those years, was the thing around my neck. The small flat piece of stamped metal on a thin ball chain that I'd worn so long I'd stopped feeling it. I thought it was a saint's medal. I'd run my thumb over its raised letters so many times I'd worn the edges smooth without ever knowing what they said. She never told me. I understand why, now. Some truths are too heavy to hand to a child. My mother died of a cancer that moved faster than any of us were ready for, the March I was 11. After that I went to live with her sister in Morganfield, a woman who meant well and showed it mostly by being tired. I was not unhappy there. I was quiet and careful the way blind kids learn to be, reading the room through sound and air pressure and the 100 little signals sighted people never have to learn. I went to school. I learned the routes. I knew the bus schedule from the stop on Crane Street to my aunt's block better than any driver who'd ever run it. That September, a Thursday, I missed my bus. It was not the end of the world. The next one came in 40 minutes. I sat on the bench with my cane between my knees and my book bag on my lap and I listened to the town go by, the way I always did, cars, someone's radio fading left to right, pigeons in the awning above the drugstore, the distant tick of the crosswalk signal half a block east. I did not hear the van until it was already at the curb. I will not say much about what came next. What I will say is that there were 2 of them, and they were not gentle, and they smelled of cigarettes and motor oil and something underneath that I did not have a word for at 12 years old but have had a word for since. Desperation. The particular stench of men who have stopped caring about the weight of what they do. They put me in the van. They drove a long time. Then they stopped somewhere loud, a truck stop, I think, from the diesel and the Jake brakes and the recorded voice calling pump numbers through a distant speaker. They were arguing about something in low voices in the front. I sat in the dark that was the same as all my dark and I held my cane in both hands and I did not cry. I had learned early that crying costs you and gains you nothing. I prayed instead. My mother had taught me that too. I did not hear the biker come into the truck stop. But I heard what happened after. His name was Deacon, though I didn't know that yet. He was the Iron Covenant Sergeant-at-Arms, a big man with hands like coal shovels and a voice like gravel in a tin drum, and he had stopped for coffee on a long ride north. He told me the story later, many times, the way men who've been shaken to their roots will retell a thing to make sure it was real. He saw the van first. A cargo van with the rear doors not fully latched, idling beside the last pump. He saw it the way a man who spent 20 years watching the world from a Harley sees things, not alarm yet, just a noting. Then the door opened and one of them climbed out to check the pump and Deacon saw me through the gap in the doors. A small girl in a school uniform, sitting very straight, holding a cane, not moving. He said what stopped him wasn't the cane. It wasn't the school uniform. It was the dog tag. I was wearing it outside my shirt that day. I'd done it without thinking, the way you fidget with something familiar when you're frightened. The overhead light of the truck stop caught it as the van door swung, and Deacon saw the raised stamp on the front, and he said later that his coffee went cold in his hand and the whole world went quiet the way the world goes quiet right before something enormous happens. Because he knew what was stamped on that tag. He knew the number. He knew the name beside the number. He'd held a flag at the funeral for the man that tag had belonged to, 11 years before, on a rainy Tuesday in a cemetery outside of Harrisburg. He'd helped carry the casket. He'd watched the president of the Iron Covenant fold the flag and hold it out to a young woman with red eyes and a 4-year-old daughter in a white dress who couldn't understand why everyone was crying. He did not go for the men in the van. He went for his phone. What he said to the president was 4 words, "I found Danny's girl." I have thought about those 4 words more times than I can count, in all the years since. 4 words that crossed the 140 miles between the truck stop and the Iron Covenant's chapter house in under a second. 4 words that did what no other 4 words I have ever heard could do. They stopped the room. The president told me later that when Deacon's call came through, there were 31 men in the chapter house, and that when he repeated those 4 words aloud every single one of them went still. Not quiet. Still. The difference is important. Quiet is an absence of sound. Still is a held breath. Still is 31 grown men with iron on their vests and histories on their skin standing as if the floor had dropped away beneath them and they were waiting to find out if they would fall. My father, Danny Reeves, had been the Iron Covenant's road captain. He had been killed by a drunk driver 11 years before I was born. No, that's wrong. 11 years before that Thursday. I was 4 when it happened and could not have understood it. What I understood, at 4, was that my father did not come home. What I understood at 12, in that truck stop, was nothing. I still knew nothing. The dog tag around my neck was, to me, a saint's medal worn smooth. But to 31 men in a chapter house 140 miles north, it was a debt. Deacon kept eyes on the van. He told me he wasn't afraid of the 2 men. I believe him. He was not the kind of man who was afraid of much, but he was afraid of what might happen if he moved wrong. So he stood near his bike with his coffee and he watched and he talked to the president in a voice too low to carry, and within 7 minutes the first 4 riders were already rolling. By the time an hour had passed, there were 63 of them converging on that truck stop from 3 directions. By the time 2 hours had passed, there were 120. By the time the night was done, there were 163 Iron Covenant riders in the lot of that truck stop and every road leading out of it, and the 2 men in the van had nowhere left to go. I heard them come. That is the thing I want you to understand. I was sitting in the dark of that van, holding my cane, praying my mother's prayers, and I heard them come, the low roll of Harleys building from a murmur to a rumble to something that stopped being sound and became something you feel in your chest. A pressure. A weight. I did not know what it was at first. Then it kept growing and growing and growing, and I knew it could not be anything small. The 2 men in the front of the van had stopped arguing. I heard one of them say something I won't repeat, and I heard the fear in it the way you hear fear when it has just walked through a door and taken its coat off. The van doors opened. The sound hit me like a wall. Engines and leather and 163 men who were not saying a word, and the silence of them under the engines was louder than the engines. I heard one of them, Deacon, I know now, come around to the back of the van, and I heard him crouch down, and his voice when he spoke was the gentlest thing I had heard since the morning my mother told me she loved me for the last time. He said, "Hey, sweetheart. You're safe now. Nobody's going to touch you." He held out his hand and I could not see it but I took it anyway, because the voice was enough. He helped me down from the van and he put his jacket around my shoulders and the jacket smelled like road and motor oil and cold air and something underneath that I did not have a word for at 12 years old but have had a word for since. Home. I stood there in the lot of that truck stop wrapped in a dead man's brother's jacket with the engines all around me and I heard the president of the Iron Covenant come to stand in front of me. I felt the air change when he stopped. He was a big man too. Most of them were. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very low, "Can I see what's around your neck?" I didn't know why he was asking. I pulled the chain out from the collar of his sergeant-at-arms' jacket and he went quiet again. I heard something then that I don't think that man had let anyone hear in a long time. One slow breath. Just one. He said, "That was your father's. His name was Danny. He was one of ours." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I pressed the tag between my fingers the way I always did and felt the worn smooth edges that I had worn smooth myself over years of not knowing, and I thought about my mother not telling me. And then I understood, the way you understand things not in words but in your whole body at once, that she had known exactly what it said. That she had put it around my neck on purpose. That this small piece of stamped metal was the only way she knew to make sure that if I was ever lost, truly lost, someone would find me. She had trusted the Iron Covenant to know their own. She had been right. The 2 men who had taken me were gone by the time the sheriff's deputies arrived. I don't know exactly what happened between the 163 riders and those 2 men in the hour before the deputies came. Nobody ever gave me the details and I never asked. What I know is that the deputies found me sitting on the back of a Harley with a borrowed jacket and a cup of hot chocolate someone had produced from somewhere, and that the rider who owned the Harley had his hands in his pockets and was telling me about the time my father had once driven the wrong way into a toll plaza and charmed his way out of a ticket, and I was laughing before I'd even realized I'd started. That was the first story they told me about my father. There have been many since. The Iron Covenant did not drop me at my aunt's door and right away. That was not how they did things. The president spoke with my aunt, who was a decent woman, and told him so herself, told him she was glad for my sake and was not too proud to say she hadn't known how to give me what I needed. There were lawyers, and paperwork, and a process that took 6 months and moved slower than any of us wanted. But it moved. I was 13 when the president became my legal guardian. I was 14 when I first sat behind Deacon on a Harley, going 40 on a long flat empty road, and felt the wind pull at me like it was trying to see what I was made of. I was 15 when the Iron Covenant had a patch made for me, not a rider's patch, but a small thing, a tribute, with my father's road captain sigil on it and my name and a set of wings. Deacon put it in my hands at the chapter house and I turned it over and ran my fingers across the raised embroidery and did not say anything for a while. I am grown now. I have a life and a city and a job that suits me, and every few months I ride back to the chapter house with whoever will pick me up and I sit in the big room that always smells like coffee and motor oil and old leather, and I listen to the men who raised me tell the same stories they have always told, and I know every voice by its particular texture the way a musician knows every instrument in an orchestra. I know Deacon's gravel and tin drum voice. I know the president's low careful cadence. I know the dozen others who brought me hot chocolate and told me about my father and taught me, over years and years, what it means to belong to something that does not quit. My mother put a dog tag on a 4-year-old girl's neck and trusted that the right men would know it. She was not wrong. She was never wrong. I wear it still.